All right, today we're going to dive into one of the most critical moments in modern history. What happened after World War II? We're going to see how a world completely in ashes didn't just rebuild, but in the process actually drew the battle lines for the next 50 years of global conflict.
And it really all comes down to this one giant question. After a war that touched every corner of the globe, a total war, how do you even begin to pick up the pieces? The answer to that question is everything. It shaped pretty much every major decision that came next.
So first, let's just get a sense of the sheer devastation. It's almost impossible to imagine. We're talking about entire cities just gone, wiped off the map. Economies had totally collapsed, and governments were just in absolute chaos.
And you saw this political chaos everywhere. Take Italy, for instance. After the war, the country went through this huge change. The people actually voted to get rid of their king and the whole monarchy, starting fresh with a new republic to cut ties with their past.
And that key term here is abolish, which, just means to formally get rid of something. And for the Italian people, it was a big deal. They chose to abolish the monarchy specifically because it was so closely tied to the fascist government that dragged them into the war. Now, out of all this rubble, two new superpowers start to rise, the United States and the Soviet Union. And they had two completely different, totally competing ideas for how the world should be put back together. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, so on one side, you had the Western approach, led by the US. Their big idea was something called the Marshall Plan. Basically, they poured huge amounts of money, financial aid, into Western European countries. Now, this wasn't just about being nice. It was a strategy to rebuild economies fast, keep democracy stable, and stop communism from spreading.
But the Soviet Union, they had a totally different playbook. Instead of giving aid, they focused on rebuilding their own massive economy. And they did it by taking direct control of countries in Eastern Europe, basically absorbing their resources to power their own growth and create a buffer of communist states.
But rebuilding wasn't just about getting help or taking resources. There was also the question of accountability. The countries that started the war, the Axis powers, they were told they had to pay for the incredible damage they'd caused.
And these payments have a name: reparations. It's money you pay to try and make amends for doing something wrong. A perfect real-world example is Germany being forced to pay huge amounts of money to countries like France, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain to help them recover. So at the same time all this economic rebuilding is going on, there was this other massive push to create a whole new international system. The goal was to prevent another world war from ever happening again, and, just as important, to hold the leaders who caused it personally accountable.
And the heart of this whole effort was the brand new United Nations. Its mission was just incredibly ambitious. The idea was to create a place where countries could work together to keep the peace, boost their economies, and this was huge: protect basic human rights for everyone, everywhere.
And for that personal accountability piece, the Allies set up one of the most famous legal trials in all of history. They brought the surviving leaders of the Axis powers to the German city of Nuremberg to face justice. Now, this is so important. These leaders weren't on trial for just, losing the war. For the very first time, people were being tried for crimes against humanity. This was a brand new legal idea created to prosecute the horrific atrocities of the war, things like the Holocaust and the use of slave labor.
So, the world is rebuilding. It's seeking justice. You'd think this would bring everyone together, right? Well, here's the twist. Those two very different paths to recovery we talked about, they didn't unite the world. They split it right down the middle and created a whole new kind of global conflict.
And this is what that split looked like. On one side, you have the Western Bloc, democratic countries, Allied and NATO, rebuilding with Marshall Plan money. On the other side, the Eastern Bloc, communist nations, allied through the Warsaw Pact and rebuilt under Soviet control. Two completely opposed worlds.
This massive division kicked off an incredibly dangerous arms race, as both sides started stockpiling nuclear weapons. This whole period of tension became known as the Cold War. And it was called that because while the two superpowers never went to hot war and fought directly, their conflicts shaped pretty much everything on the world stage for the next 50 years.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground here, from total devastation to a world split in two. So now, let's lock in some of these key ideas with a few quick questions to see what you've picked up.
Ready?
Let's get.
First up, Germany was required to make reparations to which of these countries? Was it Poland, France, or Finland?
The correct answer is France, which was one of the Allied powers that received payments.
Okay, next one. Who was providing all that financial aid through the Marshall Plan? Was it Great Britain, the United States, or Poland? That would be the United States, which funded the massive rebuilding effort in Western Europe. Question 3. The United States and Great Britain are permanent members of what? The Warsaw Pact, NATO, or the United Nations? The answer is the United Nations. And of course, they were also founding members of NATO.
All right. Why were those Axis leaders put on trial after the war? Was it just for losing, for crimes against nature, or for crimes against humanity? The critical answer here is C, crimes against humanity.
And last question, why do we call this whole era the Cold War? Was it because it was fought in the winter, fought near the North Pole, or because it did not involve direct military engagement? Yep, the answer is C. There was no direct hot war between the two main superpowers.
And that's really the main thing to take away from all this. What happened after World War II wasn't just about rebuilding buildings. It was about building a brand new world from scratch, a world whose new alliances and deep divisions would define global history for the rest of the century.